Welcome, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. We have a fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Darcy Weir is back in the house. Coming up next. Welcome back, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, my co-host is Victoria Mundae, and down in the chat room, Alina moderating the chat. We have a fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Filmmaker Darcy Weir is back with us, talking about two new films that he has out. The one he was just telling me about last night. So we're going to start with who are the men in black, or who. I'm sorry, I'm already screwing it up. Who saw the Men in Black? Yes. But real quick, before we get to Darcy, and I had the pleasure of meeting him back in June at the mega conference there in Laughlin, which was fantastic. And we had him on earlier this year for one of his other films. But before we start, we had a early super chat that came in from Robert Hanna. It says, "Hello, Darcy. We love your documentaries, including The Men in Black." So you already have a fan here in Robert Hanna. So thank you, Robert, for the super chat. Absolutely appreciate that.
Thank you very
much.
Want
to let everybody, yeah. Also want to let everybody know that this is our final show of Edge of the Rabbit Hole for the year. We're going to take 3 weeks off for the holidays, come back that second week of January. So get your fill in now. And of course, you can watch the archives and all of our past shows following this. So, but in any case, without further ado, Darcy, welcome back to the show.
Super happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike, and of course, Victoria.
Hey, Darcy.
Hey.
So you are a super busy guy because you just released the Men in Black documentary last month, and now you have a new documentary that just came out. So what all do you have going on? Because it seems like it's a lot.
Yeah, so this whole pandemic, I've been flying around the United States and filming.
Oops. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. And I basically, was making these films. The one that you saw the trailer for last night regarding TR3Bs, the rise of the TR3B. That one, technically, I started working on in 2013. I was living in Australia. I interviewed a bunch of guys that were capturing some strange UFOs, including triangles in the outback. And then, fast forward to today, 2021, I wrapped shooting on the TR3B doc probably 3 months ago. And 1091 took it. Tyler Glockner was kind enough for me to get him involved in the documentary, and he kind of is featured in the documentary because he has one of the biggest UFO channels in the world when it comes to reporting on weekly, daily news of UFOs and sightings around the planet. So I also have always been a fan of his content, and he's published so much stuff on the TR3B throughout the years. I figured, hey, why don't you work on this doc with me, and we can kind of like get this story out in the way that it deserves. So I linked up with him. I also linked up with Jim Goodall, who, as you may know, is a aviation historian. He also worked in the aviation industry. He worked on the SR-71 Blackbird. He was a telemetry and navigations installer for that super secret. Well, he actually worked on the A-12, which was the CIA version, the spy plane version of the SR-71. So he is an incredible guy. I got to work with Dr. Jack Kasher, who, has worked for NASA and is a bit of a whistleblower from within NASA because he reported and did a physics paper on the STS-48 UFO video and so on and so forth. And I just I had a really great time working on that documentary. I'm really interested in space and
Occupy Mars. There you go.
yeah, and UFO related stuff in space. I think that's really the most interesting perspective when it comes to the UFO phenomenon, because there's many different intelligence and research agencies around the world that are looking at our space, our aerospace as well as our outer space outside the planet. And there's been so many incidents in history where we've actually had incredible UFO encounters in space, but it's just not really well reported. And I really wanted to sort of crack that lid open with the Secret Space UFOs documentary. And then, sorry, I'm going to say one more thing. I know I've been rambling, sure, but I got you involved in the Men in Black documentary. Right. We met at the UFO Mega Conference this year, and that was really fun. And, I figured you wrote that really cool book on shadow entities and how that relates to some Men in Black history, with Albert Bender. So,
yeah, and I really appreciate you asking me to be a part of that. We got to chatting a little bit there on the long ride from Las Vegas down to Laughlin, and of course, they were at the conference. So, yeah, I really do appreciate you inviting me to be a part of that. And I do have queued up here the trailer for that. So I'll go ahead and play the trailer, and then we'll go ahead and discuss. And also have the trailer for the other film as well. But we'll start with Who Saw the Men in Black?
Well, Men in Black is a concept that's been in the UFO field since really the beginning of the UFO field, essentially.
What is the true mission of the Men in Black? Is it the suppression of information regarding UFOs and extraterrestrials?
Albert K. Bender founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1952 during the big UFO flap. Now, these figures were very dark in nature. They were wearing hats, almost like a fedora style, and they had glowing eyes.
Yeah, it all seems pretty horrible, especially if they threaten you or threaten your family, and you're not sure if they're from another planet or not.
What Jacobs said in the aftermath of that was that he was subject to a range of harassment type of activities. Some of these things would include threatening phone calls at all times of the day, and even to vandalism against his property damage.
There is no more exciting story that I could write or Aviation Week could publish than to say, at last, we've come across one UFO report that cannot be explained in prosaic terms. Maybe this is an alien spaceship. Biggest story of all time.
Of these objects, and that's why the response could be as fast as it was to Westall. That's why the military could get there as quickly as they did that day, because there was some, if you like, forewarning in the suburb of Baldwin, about 20 kilometres from Westall, just 4 days before the Westall incident.
Take Richard Doty, former special agent of the Air Force who was tasked with infiltrating the UFO community to instill doubt and misinformation of UFO encounters.
Men in Black have always been present in the UFO community since back in the 50s and 60s.
This story follows an age-old pattern of a prominent Men in Black cover-up. A UFO incident occurs. Experiencers witness something that shouldn't exist in our conventionally understood reality.
Yeah, fantastic film. Please, everybody go take a look at that after the show, not right this very second. Darcy right now. But I have the link in the description here on YouTube down there for both of these films. So please go ahead and check them out. Also includes Richard Doty, who we both saw there in the trailer, as well as several others. Darcy, I wanted to ask you about this documentary. Now, Men in Black have been a part of UFO lore for, since the late 1940s. So what is it that's new that you learned while putting together this documentary?
Well, to be honest, I really always knew about the Men in Black lore. Even watch. I guess the funny thing is, when I first saw the Hollywood film with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, I was a kid and I had no idea that this, Hollywood portrayal of a real history of cover-up of UFO activity around the planet, that hadn't dawned on me yet. And I probably learned most of this stuff after reading, National Security UFOs by Richard Dolan. And, he's written about the cover-up historically quite well. And I was actually, when I approached you, when we were riding the bus together from Las Vegas up to, where did we go again?
Laughlin.
Laughlin.
That was a heck of a drive. That was an hour and a half from Vegas to Laughlin.
That was
a
the
party bus.
That was the meat. That was the meat wagon. Yeah, but when we headed up there, and you told me, hey, you know what? There's actually this more paranormal, this more, extraterrestrial, or this sort of entity type story that really kicked off the Men in Black story. That was the one that I was like, really? I hadn't really even heard of Albert K. Bender before that. And, I had the Harold Dahl story from the 1940s off of Maury Island, which is off the coast of Washington State there.
Right.
But then you told me one that was coming from the 50s. And it was almost like fate, because I really wanted to build this story, this whole documentary, to have one sort of prominent story each decade. So the Harold Dahl story was in the 1940s. Albert K. Bender, with your information, was the 1950s. 1960s had guys like, it's kind of escaping me here. What's his name? Robert Jacobs, who, worked for the Air Force and recorded that UFO when they were doing a dummy warhead test missile launch. And then we get into the 70s, and we talk about what's his name? Philip Klass coming on the scene and kind of becoming the prominent skeptic in mainstream media that is just completely, obscuring every story and making it sound like there's nothing interesting to these UFO sightings. So, we kind of tell the story as the decades go that the active suppression of UFO activity was changing, and whoever is in charge of keeping this secret has been, elevating and putting figureheads into the forefront of the public. And I mean, if you look at Philip Klass and what he did, the prominent head, the editor of a aviation magazine, people are going to listen to him because he writes, for the aviation industry. So he's just going to say it's either like something in the sky that we're misidentifying, or maybe it's just a plane, whatever, right? So people listen to him. But, since he's gone, you have Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye the Science Guy. They show up on CNN and they, make fun of James Fox, or they make fun of Stanton Friedman, who was a prominent nuclear physicist that took this subject very seriously and knew that there was truth to it. And he would say, oh, you guys just believe in little green men, and then people just snicker and turn away from the subject. So the skeptics that are put in the mainstream media are kind of like an evolution of the Man in Black story. And fake news is really where things get interesting in modern history. But, people have even claimed in the past 20 years that there have been men in black, so to speak, showing up at people's doorsteps, confiscating evidence of certain prominent UFO events that have happened. So,
well, yeah, that's part of what Richard Doty talked about. Now, it's been a while since he was working, but he talks about working with the real men in black out of Fort Bellevue and what they actually did, which is quite interesting. He talks about that in your film.
Yeah, I mean, the really interesting thing about him is that he is literally a man in black, right?
Yeah.
He is a former Office of Special Investigations for the Air Force agent. So what his whole modus operandi was to intercept people that had experienced very credible UFO events. He says in the documentary, and anytime he's at a lecture, he'll say pretty much the same thing, that he was tasked with basically feeding false information to witnesses. So if the actual encounter was something from our military arsenal that was a special black budget project that they didn't want the Russians to know about or any other foreign adversaries, it was best to muddy the water, so to speak, by telling the experiencers that was a UFO, that was an alien craft, and we need this information from you. We need your photos. We need any, slag material you picked up from a possible crash site, whatever. And we need that because this is a matter of national security, right? And what some of these people didn't know was that the UFO story was a cover because it was our stuff. It was our technology that we were testing out, which perfectly leads into TR3Bs we can talk about later. But sure. He also said, and he said on other occasions, that there were certain cases where it was not our equipment, it was not our technology, and he won't get into very specific details about that, probably because that is a national security issue. And I believe him in both sides of that coin. I think that there's too much history of things that would be described as being not of this world showing up on our planet. Historically, before we even had split the atom and advanced our technology to the point that we could possibly make anti-gravity propelled vehicles in aerospace. But that's the real head scratcher. It's kind of like separating what's ours from what's possibly been theirs.
Okay. Go ahead, Victoria. I know you have some questions.
Well, that's almost like gaslighting, don't you think? Where you get so much information or disinformation, then you get all confused and you don't know what's left or what's right, what's up, what's down. How do we know this hasn't been extraterrestrial the entire time? Or maybe it's been ours the entire time. I mean, how do we know?
That's the trick. That's like the whole way that this subject can always stay not taken seriously, by the mass media. And it's the whole name of the game when it comes to information control. So when you're a intelligence agency or defense agency, DIA, you want this to be the case because you have the upper hand then. You can, if you ever want to release information, which we're kind of seeing now with disclosure, in the past 3 to 4 years since 2017, we're seeing this kind of information coming out, and it's being portrayed in a certain way from the Pentagon, but it's, again, so murky. It's like, yes, this is real. No, it's not real. Actually, we're saying that we're going to start up a research task force, and we're going to put $22 million into it. And but there's nothing that's not from our planet. Oh, wait, but that's not our equipment. That UFO incident definitely was not from our military arsenal or any known foreign arsenal. You see what I mean? So if you say both, then you can fall back on one of them when you need to. And that is the really tricky thing about this subject, is that they have the cards. They can play both games at the same time. They can say, okay, that's not ours or any known foreign arsenal. So guys, maybe we're not alone. That might be something that they're planning to do, and I think that is going to eventually happen. And then the other card game that they're playing is, well, that might be a foreign arsenal UFO, and some of this stuff might be ours.
Well, they could even flip that, saying, well, it's nothing we know about, or we know about it. Well, what if we know about, I don't know, the dark side of the moon, or Mars, or the big Mars war that went on a couple millennia ago with the 5 space alien groups or whatever. They knew about it. They can say, sure, yeah, we knew about this. It's not extraterrestrial or something, because I'm lost anyway. But just because they say they know about it, people would assume that it's from Earth. What if they know about extraterrestrial craft? And they're like, yeah, we know about it. Or am I totally off base here?
I don't think you're off base. I mean, the first sort of documentary that I published in the Secret Space sort of series that I'm doing, it's called Secret Space UFOs Part 1. That was early NASA space history UFO encounters. It was everything from the Gemini or the Apollo missions, or even before that, the X-15 aircraft, which was the very first mission where pilots were declared NASA astronauts because they flew at zero apogee above the atmosphere of the planet and felt that weightlessness, right? Mm-hmm. Even those guys at the very starting of the NASA space program, which was essentially just a kind of rocket-propelled craft that was attached to the wing of a bomber that flew really high in the atmosphere, detached, shot up into space. Even those guys, when they were doing lectures later on with the public and, just retired, whatever, they were discussing how they were tasked by NASA and the military industrial, Air Force, to take pictures of UFOs and try and track UFOs when they were up there in space. And that's pretty striking. We're talking like 1961. Mm-hmm. This is way before the 1970s when we were actually landing on the moon. And then we have so many stories of astronauts, pilots in space that were going to the moon and seeing things and commenting on things on the far side of the moon that we never see, that we can't even take photos of from our vantage point on Earth. It's the dark side of the moon because it never revolves around to our perspective. So the only enlightened folks that have been able to see that are the astronauts or the NASA space program researchers that have been sending probes around to the other side and taking photos and such. And there's just so much data, not only transcripts from NASA astronauts or photos from the different space probes that have went around the moon and taken photos of anomalies and things that are down there. Carl Wolf is pretty famous when he worked with Stephen Greer on the Disclosure Project. This is a guy that was sent to a CIA, he was sent to an NSA facility to fix a very specialized photography printer that was like pretty advanced back in the 1960s. And they were taking really high resolution pictures that they were telemetering in from the lunar orbiter, which was one of the early space probes to go out and take shots of all different sides of the moon. And on the dark side, the far side of the moon that we don't get to see, apparently when he was at this installation trying to fix a printer, basically, one of the officers that was the same rank as him in the Air Force took him aside and showed him a mosaic of a base that's not ours, that's not any known foreign adversary's base, because they weren't even really in space like the NASA astronauts were, the Americans. So he was saying, look, we found structures on the moon, what looked like big dishes and massive buildings, but they looked ancient. So whose was that? And it's definitely not ours. So that's, to your point, Victoria, that is the sort of like, that's one of the stories that, if we could actually have those pictures in the public, and Carl Wolf is dead now, he got hit by a car.
Interesting.
Well, you have the mystery hut from China now.
There you go. That looks like a structure, right?
It definitely looks like some sort of structure. And I posted a link earlier today on my Facebook about why their rover that they have up there has not been able to immediately go to it, because how slow the thing works, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But to your point, as you were talking, you had astronauts like Edgar Mitchell and Buzz Aldrin make some comments over the years, about different things that they saw and experienced and all that. Kind of have a follow-up question here from Alina, our chat moderator, on this subject. She's wondering, if the government tries to cover up UFOs, what do you think their reasons really are, other than not spooking the public? What's the reason for the whole cover-up?
Not spooking the public is a multifaceted sort of repercussion. If you spook the public, you could affect the economy, you could affect industry, especially the energy infrastructure industry that we have around the planet. We're still a type 0 or type 1 civilization that's burning things. We burn wood, we burn fuel or gas or oil. When we use nuclear energy, we're essentially boiling a massive industrial tea kettle, and the steam that's produced from that is moving turbines to create energy. And by facilitating that whole steam reaction, we're dipping nuclear rods into water that we've set off this nuclear reaction by, starting the nuclear reaction on an atomic level. And we're boiling that water, and we're creating incredibly dangerous situations that we saw with Fukushima and the 3 Mile Island, incident. Those forms of energy are accepted. Nuclear that's dangerous, or fossil fuels. And I do believe that UFOs are not running on burnt wood or, nuclear rods the way that we would perceive traditional nuclear energy to run. I think there's definitely some kind of nuclear reaction to some of these vehicles. And, that exotic technology is just something that's not in the public. And UFOs, if you look at a really interesting case study that happened in history with, his name is escaping me, but he did Citizen Kane.
Orson Welles?
Oh, Orson Welles. Yeah.
Right? He created that radio broadcast show back when radio was in every home of the American public, not a television. And he created the War of the Worlds story. People became so frantic back then. Was this, I think it was the 40s. When was that?
Early 30s.
Early
Yeah,
30s. Okay. So
yeah,
it's
it was the
before the
30s.
40s.
Yeah.
This drove people mad. There was literally people running in the countryside with guns thinking that aliens had really come to take over the planet. And that case study is just sort of a fraction of what the paranoia might be like if we actually announce to the public we're not alone. And there are possibly folks from out there visiting our planet, and we can't stop them. You know, what kind of paranoia would that cause? There's a sense of control that the government wants people to feel like they have every day when they wake up, right? So.
Yeah.
It sounded like you had a comment or a question there, Victoria.
Oh, well, Darcy kind of knows where I live, but you know, I've grown up with NASA in my backyard. And it's something that was gently wedged into our heads. I don't want to say beaten into our heads, you know, but you know, NASA Pride, whenever they would have liftoffs, we would all gather together in the auditorium and watch them. Everything up until the Challenger, and then you know, we stopped watching after that. But my uncle actually worked for NASA, and he would come home, and you know, I was a little kid, so I didn't know what he was really talking about. But I'd always hear my aunt go, "Oh, you're lying," and then he would shut up, and you could tell there was something. He knew something, or he had seen something, but you know, he wasn't divulging anything. And about War of the Worlds, the reason why that was so hysterical is a lot of people missed the beginning of it, where they said this is a document or a drama, a play drama, radio drama. And when they came in, that's when they heard that the aliens were taking over, and that's when the panic ensued and everything.
Yeah, it caused all the regulations to be put in place to do the station identifications and all that. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Know about that?
Thanks, Orson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Orson.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, question here from Sarah Youssef, and then we'll get to the trailer for your other film. So she asks, given the abundance of UFO sightings over places of spiritual power, do you believe that the UFOs use some form of electro-spiritual energy that humans produce as fuel?
That's an interesting one. I have not actually heard that before. But you know, I think there is some connection with like ancient megalithic sites that are built on ley lines, which are some kind of like naturally energetic places on the planet. There have been lots of UFO sightings around there. And I think in the UK, for example, Stonehenge, it has heralded many UFO sightings over the years. People gather there and record UFOs when they have like festivals every year. So, I mean, in terms of spiritual, I'm not a very spiritual guy. I'm kind of like a nuts and bolts, kind of geeky, sciencey type guy. So I don't know well enough, but I'm pretty sure if you asked Stephen Greer or some of these other folks that are, you know, really well educated in that type of question, they will say there is some kind of connection to some UFO activity.
You know, it might not just be spiritual, because for me, like when I go back to where my mom lived, I like to go by and see where the house is or was. And she's been gone like 30 years now. So perhaps these are extraterrestrials visiting places where they've been before, like Stonehenge. Like, oh, yeah, let's go back. So this is why they're being picked up at certain spots over and over.
Cruise by the old hood.
You know, yeah. Hey, those rocks are still standing, you know.
Hey, let's join the party.
Right. Woohoo! Yeah.
All right, so let's get to your other film here. We'll go ahead and run the trailer here.
When's that one coming
Bring
out?
that up.
It's
It's
out
out
now. It's out
Oh.
Yeah, we have the links down in the description.
Well, you know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Sweet.
I love your films, Darcy. They're awesome.
Leave a review. Let me know what you think, Victoria.
I am always one of your first reviewers. I got to say, The Underground is by far my favorite.
Thank you.
I can't tell you how many times.
You
I've
like
watched it.
everything underground.
Yes, I talked to Darcy last night. I don't know if you read my message. I'm the hollowed earth,
Hollowed Earth, yeah.
not hollow.
I saw
hollowed.
that.
Oh no, not hollow. Okay.
ED.
All right. So I did totally
Hollowed.
misread that. We'll
That's why
talk
it's in
about.
big letters.
Ah, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. I'll go back to that chat after this.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and run the trailer.
While it's been widely discussed that UFOs are of an alien nature, we are starting to realize that many of these may also be man-made.
The stuff I was working on wasn't classified. The programs that we're monitoring were.
Unconventional and unacknowledged activities and science that are not supposed to exist.
It accelerated at about a 30-degree angle of attack and left them in the dust. I mean, boom, 8,000 to 10,000 miles an hour.
They looked like butterflies that were on fire. Well, when I played the footage back, there was a TR-3B sitting there cloaked above that ship the entire time.
Why is it that if these are solid triangular craft, are we able to sometimes see stars through them?
You're going to have a militarization of space, like an arms race in space, and that's going to require a significant classified component. That is a secret space program.
We're dealing with something very close to alien technology, engineered down to the atomic level.
Something really odd is going on out there.
Okay, Secret Space UFOs, Rise of the TR-3B. There is a link down in the description. You can click on it, watch it. Definitely check out Darcy's film. So for those in our audience who are watching now or listening later, what exactly is a TR-3B?
So the story goes, or the legend goes, is that possibly the TR-3B had its maiden flight in 1979. This craft was a collaboration of a couple different military contractors, avionics, aviation contractors. Some say it could possibly come out of Northrop Grumman, because we do know that the TR-3A, which was actually published in Popular Mechanics as being a craft that Northrop Grumman built, that could have, been the experimental craft before the TR-3B. Edgar Fouché, he famously came out to the UFO community in the 90s talking about how he worked at Area 51, and this was a place where they were testing the TR-3B. And the TR-3B did not use your traditional jet fuel propulsion that the TR-3A supposedly did. The TR-3B possibly was using a human version, our physics and our reverse engineering best and brightest attempt to replicate what we found in a crash craft. So this is a anti-gravity engine that we made on a much larger scale, sort of like an aircraft carrier that could go to space. And, I talked to Jeremy Reese, who has done some really good research into the workings of the TR-3B, and if you watch the documentary, we cover some of that. But basically, this is where you get into the propulsion by a possible anti-gravity means. You know, we're not talking about your traditional burning things science, you know. So we go through military history or Air Force history, and we go through some of the craft that have been known to be out there in the wild. We go over some of the UFO encounters that have happened in, you know, very high altitudes in our atmosphere or outer space. And we also go into the lore and the supposed history of the TR-3B. And did this thing actually come out of Area 51? And, you know, are we seeing these black triangles that some people have called, you know, extraterrestrial UFOs? Are we actually seeing our craft flying around the planet throughout history?
Okay, now
Victoria, you'd put up your finger, so it seemed like you had a question or a comment there.
I need like a buzz-in button. You know, okay. Okay.
Just start talking.
No, I don't want to be rude. No, I don't want to interrupt. From what? Okay, first of all, is the 3RTB? No, 3R TR3B the bat? Okay, is it actually been acknowledged, or is it all hearsay? And then secondly, from what I was trying to figure out, because I never even heard of this when you mentioned it yesterday, so I did a little research, and there's something called the Black Manta that uses pressurized mercury, which is accelerated by nuclear energy, which creates the electromagnetic anti-gravity propulsion system, which if you throw in the Higgs boson field theory, which is, what is it, negative, no particle charge or something that would allow them to float up, would that be able to actually go into outer space too?
Yeah, so you kind of mixed a little bit of both craft together there, but the Black Manta is the TR-3A. So that's the one that Northrop Grumman would have produced, which then the TR-3B would have used this Mercury engine that was a rotating superconductor, but they were using a liquid metal. Basically, that's what mercury is, kind of. And
pressurized mercury.
Yeah, pressurized mercury. They kept it super cooled, and they rotated it super fast, and this created a anti-gravitic force so that a craft could float.
Right.
And supposedly a very big craft, because, you know, the story goes with the TR-3B that, you know, this could carry tanks, this could carry whole fleets of personnel and people and other planes into space.
So if the Higgs boson field has no particle matter, that would allow it to float, right? And if that's in outer space, then theoretically those could fly in outer space as well?
Well, it's also said that the corners of this ship was propelled by possibly some kind of hydrogen propulsion. So I think they did use some. I mean, hydrogen is not a fossil fuel. It's created from water, H2O. So that's a gas that is highly unstable. But apparently they were using that to make it, you know, turn and stuff. But they would get it to go into space with this manipulation of gravity, which you're talking about, the changing of the you know, altering the gravity for an object that should have gravity. You know, you basically set off this reaction that makes this object no longer have weight, and then once it's in space, you know, you can use hydrogen to go places, and you can also use this engine to shoot somewhere pretty quick.
Okay, but it would still have weight, right? It could just fly around because it looks like a donut. You know, the way the energy comes out.
Yeah,
And
I
it
think
would
that
be the.
It's
that would be the
toroidal. Yeah.
yeah, I think with that whole torsion field, you're basically yeah, you're basically everything that's within it no longer has is no longer being subject to gravity.
So that could also be like the. Okay. It's not the Tic Tac. What was it? The little space alien thing they saw over the water. The Tic.
Yeah,
They
the
called
Tic
it the
Tac,
Tic
the
Tac.
Tic
Okay.
Tac UFO,
Yeah.
the Go Fast gimbal
Okay.
UFOs.
So
I mean,
That
these
would be
all
the same thing, right? Because it could, you know.
yeah, sure. It shot around like a ping pong, one pilot said in the sky. So that means that you've got an object that moves to one area of the sky and then shoots over to another and stops on a dime. And when you've got that type of that kind of maneuver, there's nothing that we have that runs on fossil fuel that can do that. So, you know, then you have two different camps out there. There's a camp that says, well, that's not ours. That's got to be ET. And then you've got a camp that says that might be ours, but it's just unacknowledged and it's not divulged to the public, right?
See, that's where I'm going. Yeah. Because
and I do believe that some of these are things that we've created. Some of these things are us. But when you have, like we're talking about the Tic Tac and the gimbal and all that, stopping on a dime, moving in some of these crazy directions, you know, the G-force in that, we would pass out or it would crush us. So, you know, at least as far as we know with our current technology. So is there also technology currently being developed, or maybe it's in some of these different craft to compensate for the fact that some of these G-forces would kill us?
Yeah, so I think the argument there is that as soon as you create this sort of torsion field, you create this field of anti-gravity around your ship, the occupants inside are not feeling that gravity either. So you're not like, you know, if you look at shooting an arrow through the air, it's actually moving through a fluid atmosphere, right? Like air is just a gaseous fluid, and there's still friction that's being felt by that arrow, and eventually it slows down and it hits the ground. But as soon as you're creating this sort of torsion field, you're basically negating any friction. There's no such thing as that anymore. Everything that's within that bubble is not being influenced by gravity anymore.
Because I think that's what, oh my gosh, the Rendlesham Forest man, Jim, I forgot his last name.
Peniston.
Right,
Yep.
because he was calling that the sphere of influence, which was around his craft. So that would be like the same thing, right?
Yeah, and John Burroughs, he also discussed being inside of what was like a sphere or a bubble of energy that he had walked into. The interesting thing about those two men is that Jim Peniston said that he saw and heard something completely different from John Burroughs.
Yeah.
John Burroughs said that, you know, when he entered, he didn't see a craft. He felt like he was inside of some kind of like presence. Like he said he felt like he was part of some kind of intelligence when he walked past that barrier into this like this bubble of energy.
So it's almost like an egg, and you're walking into the membrane, depending on how close you get to the yolk. Do you see it or not? Or
that was kind of what John Burroughs was alluding to when I interviewed him. Jim Peniston is famous for saying, I saw this triangular craft, you know, this very high technology, metallic shaped triangular craft, or he said it looked like a diamond actually. And it had what looked like hieroglyphics on the side, and he ran his hand along that metallic surface and saw there was light emanating from behind the hieroglyphics or something like that. So
yeah, and that's where he got, we've had Jim on the show a couple of times, and that's where he got that download, that flash of the binary code.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like there are many stories out there where people describe black triangles, and they also have ET related experiences. So I'm not saying this documentary, every film has to be a certain form and length. And in this documentary, I wanted to explain something that was quite prevalent, that was important for people to know. But in a later documentary, I'd like to explain that maybe not all black triangles are ours.
Now, it's interesting you said that, because I used to live in Arizona, and I was telling Mike before, I was out in Scottsdale, and I wasn't too far from Luke Air Force Base, and I had a convertible, and I looked up, and I saw it looked like more of a boomerang type thing. Nobody else was looking at it because you could definitely see through it. You could see the clouds, but it was in the daylight. Do people see these in the daytime, or was I just looking at something weird from Luke Air Force Base?
Of course. And I mean, there's people that have famously recorded infrared camera daylight footage of these triangles just floating in the sky, and you can see the sky behind this formation, these three lights. And some people believe, even Jeremy Reese said that there's been plenty of research and work that's been done throughout history into what's called metamaterials. And metamaterials we're talking about materials that exemplify what we would think is alien technology. Things that are manipulated or constructed down to the atomic level that can do things like bend light, refract light, and even present a certain image to hide what is actually there. Sorry?
I'm sorry. Wouldn't that be the easiest way to hide something, is just to put it out there in plain view for everyone to see and say, oh, it's like Kris Kringle. Yeah, he's real. I don't want to say anything. You never know.
I mean,
young viewers, but we all know it's not real.
I believe he's real. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you're ruining my life here, Victoria. What's going on with you?
But Victoria, it's interesting that you mentioned Arizona, because Robert Hanna has a question here, is asking, what is Darcy's theory on the triangle UFO seen over Phoenix, Arizona back in '97?
Oh, I heard a great discussion on that one.
Yeah, so the Phoenix lights, I've heard two different stories on that. I've heard one, James Fox made it a really prominent story in his documentaries and his research on that phenomenon. The really interesting thing is that the footage that he featured in I Know What I Saw, and the stuff that you can find on YouTube, and I was speaking to another aerospace worker, somebody who works in sort of like a military industrial complex company, and he was telling me that there was footage out there in the wild that was from 8 o'clock that night that showed something that was way larger than what you see in the footage that was recorded at 10 o'clock that night. And apparently the footage that was recorded earlier has been wiped, that you can't really find it anywhere. If anybody finds it, I wanted to actually show that footage in this documentary, but I couldn't find it. You can't get it anywhere. And it apparently was what many people had seen flying over Arizona for that whole night. But it was just recorded earlier, and it showed definitely a very large craft that some people say they could sometimes see glints of metallic sort of structure, and others said that they could see the stars shining right through it. So it had possibly that sort of same TR-3B character to it, which is the metamaterial sort of technology that would allow you to cloak the craft and not allow it to be seen with the human eye at first glance. And, you know, under the cover of night, that's also an advantage. But yeah, I find it really interesting that people have reported that there's earlier footage from that night that was out online. You can't get it on YouTube anymore. You can't find it anywhere. But the famous footage that James Fox has shown was what the military said, well, that's just flares. That was just a military exercise. And it's very possible that footage that's really prominent, that you can actually see from that night that was later, actually was flares that was used to distract and to debunk the subject later on in the public. So what happens then is the Air Force scrambles some aircraft to go up in over Arizona, drop those flares, and then they can say, okay, this is debunkable. That was just a military exercise, guys. Those were flares. Nothing to see here. But that doesn't make any sense because there were thousands of people in the state of Arizona that saw something that was not flares, that slowly was flying over the state until it got to Phoenix and went beyond, right?
Yeah, because it
Well,
started
if there's
up
some
north.
earlier footage, yeah.
Well,
if there's some early,
I've seen that.
Go
I've
ahead,
seen the footage.
Victoria.
I saw the footage a couple of years ago on YouTube, so I'll look for it. But it started up like near Flagstaff, and it went slow the whole night. It went over Sky Harbor, and then it was hanging out at Australia Mountains, which happens to be named for the star people. What a catch there. But I was in a conference with Linda Mooten Howell, and she had a little laser pointer, and she actually drew the outline, you know, and it dips behind the mountain. And it is so clear when you do that. But they did send out flares, planes later from Luke, but the flares don't stay up. They kind of drift down. But those lights stayed in formation for a very long time.
Yeah, so I mean, that is a case, and that kind of story fits the form and function and size of apparently what the TR-3B was. You know, a massive craft that was able to go to space, silently propel itself, and, you know, had the ability of metamaterials, which is cloaking technology and all that type of stuff. So I don't know. It could have been a legitimate TR-3B sighting.
Very interesting. We are down to the last 2 minutes of the show. Yeah, it goes by quick. Always
Darn.
does.
I was just getting into it.
I know, right? I did want to ask you if there was some original footage from earlier that evening. I mean, are we saying that maybe government came by and wiped that, or something like that? I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of conspiracy theory behind it.
It makes sense. I mean, if you look at what the whole objective of the Men in Black is, it's to intimidate witnesses, distract the public, take credible information and keep it from the public, and, you know, control information. That's pretty much their modus operandi.
Yep. Mm-hmm. All right. So given that we have now a minute and a half left. All right. So where can everybody find this? I've been throwing up here on the screen all night your occultjourneys.com link. I'm sure they can find the link through there. But real quick, Darcy, for the audio version of this later, where can they find you, your films, all that great information?
Sure. All my films are on my website, but you can just search my name, Darcy Weir, on Amazon or iTunes or Vudu, many of these different streaming services out there, and my catalog of films should come up.
Fantastic. Great to have you back on the show, Darcy. And, you have 2 films here back-to-back release, which are fantastic. So everybody, you have things to watch over the holidays here. So definitely go out and grab those Who Saw the Men in Black and the Secret Space UFOs, Rise of the TR-3B. So, Darcy, again, thank you so much for coming out this evening.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome.
All right, absolutely.
Aw,
We'll
good to
catch up
talk
with
to
you
you.
again later. Take
Happy
care.
holidays.
Yes, happy holidays.
Thanks. You too.
All right, Darcy Weir, everybody, our final guest for 2021. So, yeah, that was it was really fun to work with him on that. Talking about Albert K. Bender and Who Saw the Men in Black, because that's a story that I've been talking about with shadow entities, possibly being ETs or the Men in Black, or are they or was that paranormal phenomena with Bender? So yeah, that was cool to be able to kind of bring that story into it's cross genre, really.
Oh yeah,
So.
It's a really great documentary with Richard, and then he talks and
Mhm.
talks. And he's a great storyteller. Little B-roll here and there. Here comes Mike. There goes Richard. Here's some B-roll. I mean, it just flows.
Yeah,
and
that
it's so
had a lot
nice.
of Richard Dolan in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like Dolan was kind of telling the story. Then Richard Doty came in toward the end. They had John Burroughs in there, a couple of others. So yeah,
It was
very
very
cool.
smooth. Very good story. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
whoever did the artwork here, this
yeah.
pops.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is I really like that. So
That's cool. Yeah.
yeah, very, very cool. So, all right, we'll go ahead and get to the shout out. So, again, this is our final episode for 2021. We'll be back in January. I believe it's the 11th. So we have 3 weeks off here. And it's January 11th. Joe Diamond is scheduled to be our first one of the new year. He was originally supposed to be the last one of this year. We were going to do some different holiday things with him, but he had to reschedule for us. So we brought Darcy in early, which is great. It's perfect timing because originally we were going to have Darcy in January, but perfect timing since he just had these 2 releases for his films. So it all worked out.
Perfect. It's like it was meant to be.
It was like it was meant to be. There you go. The universe, the
Right.
connected universe working in strange ways. Yeah. So, all right. Do want to thank Alina for being our chat moderator this evening. Let's get to the participants tab. And just to let everybody know, stay on the lookout beginning of the year for the time, because we've been talking about changing the time, making it a little bit earlier for Edge of the Rabbit Hole. So be on the lookout for that. So we have Hunter Road Media's Fairy Queen, Diane Hilbert. Thanks for joining us once again. There's Helen Espinoza. Nick Moulet is in the house. Great to see you, Nick. Robert Hanna. Oh, do want to mention that Robert Hanna was a Super Chat superstar this evening. Appreciate that, Robert. He dropped a $5 Super Chat right before the show. So thank you very much, Robert. Stacy Comiskey is in the house. Sue Brunetti, thanks for joining us tonight. And there's Thayer. Great to see you, Thayer. Scroll up through here, since we know that participants tab never includes everybody. Like sometimes it's like there's 3 people in the participants tab. It's like, come on, there's 30 people here during the night. There's Fungi.
Woohoo!
And we know that Adam Tiller's down there lurking. There's Sarah Youssef. Thank you for your questions, Sarah. AA. Thanks for joining us tonight. Christine Louviere, thank you once again. Jennifer Bloomer, as always. Who else did we have? We had, I'd have to scroll. Zippy Davis dropped in. Great to see you, Zippy.
Voice from the past.
Yeah. Field Guy 316, thank you very much. Let's see, there is also Bill Prack was in the house. Great to see you, Bill, as well as Mary Haygood. And so see Michelle Millions and Nicole was in here earlier as well.
Happy birthday a day late, Nicole. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, yesterday was Nicole's birthday. So
21 finally.
Let's celebrate a little bit there. Yes, she's finally 21.
Woohoo!
No,
yeah.
come on. I'd be rocking the cradle there. Come on.
You're 23, right? No.
Yeah. So there's Adam Tillery lurking. And here we go. Last minute super chat here. TFT Terror for today. $15 super chat. Thanks for all the great shows this year. Really enjoy them. Thank you so much for the $15 super chat. Absolutely appreciate it.
She and Mr. O are just awesome. They're really good friends.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So, and there's Robert wishing Nicole a happy birthday. So, all right. So, a couple things further for later this week. Tomorrow is our last Connecting the Universe interactive class, 8 p.m., connecteduniverseportal.com. Of course, 30-day free trial for those that are new members to the Connected Universe. Come check it out. And Adam's saying his project is done. Awesome. Sounds great,
Yay.
Adam.
Can I give you my homework
You're looking
now?
forward to that. And then Thursday night on Facebook, we have the virtual tour of Ireland. So it's almost kind of like a preview of next year's Ireland trip. So there's still 4 tickets available for the Ireland tour next July 1st through the 9th. So watch the virtual tour. It starts at 7 p.m. Thursday. You just let me bring that up here real quick because there's not like a group
Eastern?
or anything for it. It's a Facebook event. Yeah, 7 p.m.
Okay.
Eastern. It is called, that's the Ireland tour. Okay, it's called Ancient Celtic Christmas Traditions in Ireland. And so this is it's a virtual tour. It's put on by Ireland Virtual Tours. So I met the guy about a week ago. Maria Schmidt from Mysterious Adventures Tours has put all this together. So usually this is a $20 hour-long virtual tour. It's free on Thursday night. So definitely come check it out.
So get the Yule log cake early. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
So, all right, everybody. That's it for this evening. I want to wish everybody a very happy, safe holiday season, a very happy new year. We will see you all in 2022, except for those that are going to join us tomorrow for Connecting the Universe and Thursday for the virtual tour of Ireland. We'll see you guys those nights. For everybody else, enjoy your holidays. Take care.
Bye.
I'm trying to get to the, there it is.
The dance remix? Okay.
Yeah.